I stood in front of my own house, suitcase in one hand, key in the other, and nothing made sense. The key didn't fit. The lock was changed. I tried again, jiggling the brass like maybe it had just gotten old while I was gone. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the lock that had aged. It was everything else. The car in the driveway wasn't mine, or Ronald's, or Katie's. A sleek silver Audi, too new, too clean, too out of place. I rang the doorbell. No answer. Waited, still nothing. So I walked around the side gate, we never locked it, and stepped into the backyard, ready to knock on the patio doors. That's when I saw her. A woman, younger than me by at least 20 years. Long dark hair wrapped in a towel, sipping coffee from the mug that used to be mine, the chipped blue ceramic one with faded birds on it. She was wearing one of my bathrobes. At first, I thought maybe Katie had a guest, a friend, a cousin, maybe. I opened my mouth to ask who she was, but she looked at me like I was the intruder. "Can I help you?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. I froze. "I live here," I said slowly. "This is my house." "Where's my husband?" She tilted her head, amused. "Ronnie's at work, but I think you're confused. This isn't your house anymore." "Ronnie?" Her voice was so casual, like we were discussing the weather. I took a step forward, and she didn't flinch. "I'm calling him," I said, fumbling for my phone. My fingers shook so badly I could barely unlock the screen. She just walked back inside and slid the door shut in my face. I stood there, outside my own home, and suddenly the September air felt sharper than it should have. I called Ronald, straight to voicemail, then Katie. She picked up. "Hi, Mom," she said like nothing was wrong. "There's a woman in our house," I said, wearing my robe, drinking from my mug. "Do you know anything about this?" Katie went quiet. "You need to calm down," she finally said. "Dad explained everything. You've been gone a long time. Things changed." "What things?" "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want to be part of this." Then she hung up. And that's when it hit me. They were all in on it. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the car outside the house, my house, and trying to piece everything together. 3 months ago, I left for Idaho to take care of my dying mother. She had stage 4 cancer, no one else to care for her. I didn't hesitate, not even for a second. Ronald had told me, "Do what you have to. We'll be here when you get back." We FaceTimed once a week. He always looked tired, distracted, but I thought that was just stress. Katie had stopped calling altogether. I thought maybe she was busy with work. I thought a lot of things. Apparently, I was wrong about all of them. After Mom passed, I stayed behind to handle her funeral and sort through the estate. I barely slept. I ate gas station sandwiches and cried in her old armchair. Every photo I packed into a box, every drawer I emptied, felt like tearing out a piece of myself. But I kept going because I knew, or I thought I knew, that when I got back, I'd have a home, a husband, a daughter, a place to fall apart. But no one had warned me that while I was burying one woman I loved, another was quietly replacing me. The next morning, I returned with a police officer. "I'm sorry," the officer said after speaking to the woman, whose name, I learned, was Vanessa. "She showed me a deed, properties in your husband's name only. You'll need to resolve this through court." I looked at the house one more time. The hydrangeas I'd planted in spring had been pulled out. My wind chimes were gone. There were new curtains in the upstairs bedroom. Floral ones, soft and pink, not at all my taste. My life had been scrubbed clean like I never existed. And in that moment I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just betrayal. This was planned. Ronald hadn't just fallen in love with someone else. He had erased me, but I wasn't going to disappear that easily. Ronald and I met at a university mixer in 1992. He was the kind of man who made you feel seen, even in a crowded room. Confident, well-spoken, not flashy, but solid. I was 21 and studying English literature. He was finishing his MBA and already wearing that quiet air of someone going somewhere. He said I reminded him of Katharine Hepburn. I said he reminded me of no one, and I meant it. We married 2 years later, bought a starter home, had Katie within 3 years. We weren't rich, but we were stable. I taught high school English. He worked his way up in logistics. We made plans, vacations, renovations, savings. We argued like any couple, but nothing ever broke us, at least not loudly. Looking back now, I can see it. Not in what he said, but in what he stopped saying. The way he stopped noticing when I got haircuts. How he ate dinner in silence, scrolling through his phone. How we stopped touching. Not angrily, just indifferently. We became polite roommates, but it didn't scare me, not then. We were busy, life was stressful. People go through phases. Katie went to college, then moved back home briefly when she couldn't find a job. Ronald adored her. Maybe too much. He indulged her in everything, bought her a car without asking me, let her skip paying rent, never said no. I thought it was sweet if a bit much. Now I wonder, was she the ally he needed to get me out? 3 months before my mother got sick, I told Ronald we should take a weekend trip together. Just us, like we used to. He said he was too swamped. Maybe later? He added, but there was no intention behind his voice. I didn't press. I'd gotten used to the maybe laters. Then the phone rang. It was my mother's neighbor in Idaho. Mom had collapsed on her porch. Hospital, stage 4, no time. Ronald hugged me, said, "Do what you need to do, we'll be fine." I packed in 2 hours and booked the first flight. I didn't know it then, but I was packing up my life. Idaho was hard. Mom didn't want to die. She fought, begged, cried. I bathed her, changed her, read to her when she was too weak to hold a book. At night, I slept on a thin sofa beside her hospital bed, jumping awake every time her breathing shifted. I sent Ronald updates, short ones. He always responded with emojis or "got it" or "let me know if you need anything." Katie texted even less. The funeral was small. Mom didn't have many people left. Afterward, I stayed in her house a week. Sorting her belongings was like cutting through silk with dull scissors. Slow, painful, irreversible. She'd left me the house, of course, and boxes of letters, photos, trinkets. I packed them carefully. Told myself it would all be better once I got back to my own home. But my home wasn't waiting. It had already replaced me. I thought of that again as I sat in a cheap motel room that smelled of bleach and old soap. My phone buzzed, a message from Katie. I hesitated, then opened it. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. Things just happened." No explanation, no apology, no grief. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "What exactly happened? Explain it to me like I'm not your mother." No response. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. The clerk was polite but cold. Property records weren't private. All I had to do was show my ID and Ronald's name. Within minutes, she printed out a packet. The house was now listed under Ronald's name only. My name had been removed 4 weeks ago, not sold, just transferred. Quietly, there was a signature, mine, except I never signed anything. My chest went cold. This wasn't just cheating. This was forgery. I folded the papers and walked out slowly. The air outside felt thinner, like I'd stepped into a higher altitude. My ears rang. That evening, I called a former student of mine, Julie Garth. She'd become a lawyer, smart, precise, fiercely protective of people she cared about. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but I left a message. She called back in 15 minutes. "Miss Morrison," she said, "you always told us never to let anyone erase us from the story. So tell me what happened from the beginning." So I did. And when I finished, she said just 2 words. "I believe you." Julie met me the next day at a quiet cafe near the courthouse. She arrived precisely on time, in a navy blazer and black heels, with a leather satchel packed tighter than any briefcase I'd ever seen. She hadn't changed much, still sharp-jawed, quick-eyed, calm in a way that made everyone else around her fidget. I handed her the packet from the county office. She read through it without blinking, then held up the page with my forged signature. "Did you ever sign anything granting Ronald sole ownership of the property?" "Never," I said. "I inherited that house. My grandmother's name was on it before mine. Ronald was added later when we got married, but I never signed anything to take myself off." She nodded. "Then this is illegal and stupid. Whoever forged this didn't even try to mimic your handwriting. I can file an injunction this afternoon." My heart lifted for the first time in days. "But," she added, flipping to the back page, "we're going to need more, especially if they claim you abandoned the home." "I didn't abandon anything," I snapped. "I know, but in court we need proof. You were in Idaho. We'll show hospital records, flight receipts, messages, anything that proves you were acting in good faith, and that he wasn't." Julie opened her tablet and started pulling documents from public registries faster than I could follow. She found the notarized deed transfer, with a notary ID linked to a woman who'd been suspended 6 months earlier for falsifying DMV documents. She found a temporary tenant agreement for Vanessa, signed by Ronald alone. And most damning of all, a closed account under my name that showed a withdrawal 2 weeks ago. I hadn't made it, but someone had. "Identity theft," she muttered, taking notes. "And if your daughter had any part in helping him execute this, we need to know." I stared at the steam rising from my untouched coffee. Katie wouldn't, but I couldn't finish the sentence, because deep down, I wasn't sure anymore. That night, I parked near my house again, not to confront, just to observe. The curtains were open. Inside, Vanessa floated around in yoga pants and one of my old sweaters, carrying a glass of wine and laughing on the phone. My bookshelves, the ones I'd alphabetized obsessively, were rearranged. The framed photos of Katie as a child were still there, but my wedding photo was gone. I turned off the engine and sat in the dark. Across the street, I noticed the porch light of our neighbors, Mark and Evelyn, still on. Mark had lived there since the 90s. He'd watched our daughter grow up, babysat our dog. I took a chance. When he opened the door, he blinked in surprise. "Claire?" I nearly cried. I explained everything, as much as I could without collapsing. Mark shook his head. "We thought it was weird. Ronald told us you'd moved to Idaho permanently, that you'd split, and that he was seeing someone new." "Did he say why I left?" Mark hesitated. "He said you'd been unstable, that you needed space." I closed my eyes. Mark took a deep breath. "Claire, I didn't believe it. Evelyn either, but Katie, she confirmed it, said it was better this way." It hit like a brick, the way betrayal always does, not with drama, but with a slow, aching squeeze. The next morning, Julie and I filed the injunction. The judge issued a temporary freeze on any property transfers, utility accounts, and financial withdrawals related to the house. Julie also filed a subpoena for phone records, notary logs, and bank access. The real bomb dropped that afternoon. Julie had asked a digital forensic contact to examine the withdrawal made from my account. The IP address? It came from inside the house, my own Wi-Fi router. "That's not just sloppy," she said. "That's traceable." I sat still for a long moment. Then I said, "I want to confront them." Julie looked at me carefully. "Not yet. Let the court speak first. It carries more weight." I nodded, but inside, something was boiling. This wasn't just legal anymore. This was personal. They hadn't just stolen my house. They'd stolen my daughter's trust, my reputation, my identity, and I wasn't going to let them rewrite my story. 3 days later, the moment I had been both dreading and craving arrived. Julie served the injunction in person. It was a crisp Friday morning when we pulled into the driveway, mine, not his, in Julie's silver sedan. She'd advised me to stay quiet, to let her handle everything. Still, my heart beat like a war drum under my coat. Vanessa opened the door. She was wearing my cashmere sweater, the one Ronald gave me for our 20th anniversary. Her face fell when she saw Julie, and it collapsed entirely when she saw me. Julie handed her the thick envelope. "You are being formally served on behalf of Claire Mitchell. Effective immediately, all transfers, lease agreements, and utility modifications involving this property are frozen by court order." Vanessa didn't respond. She just stared, at the envelope, at Julie, at me. Then Ronald appeared in the hallway behind her. He was barefoot, holding a coffee mug that used to say, "World's Best Dad." He blinked, then set the mug down like he'd been expecting this, but not this soon. "Claire," he said coolly, "this is unnecessary." I said nothing. Julie repeated herself, calm and firm. "This property is under investigation for forgery, identity fraud, and unauthorized transfer of marital assets. You'll receive a court summons within the week." Vanessa backed away. Ronald clenched his jaw but stayed still. Then Katie appeared at the top of the stairs. She was wearing pajamas, hair mussed, holding her phone like she was mid-text. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw flickers of the child I used to tuck in at night. "Mom," she whispered. I didn't answer. I turned and walked back to the car. That evening, I got a message from Katie. Just one line. "I didn't know it would go this far." I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? "You didn't know your father was faking my signature. You didn't think it mattered when you told the neighbors I'd gone unstable." She had chosen a side, and I wasn't on it. Julie moved quickly. She had a forensic handwriting analyst review the signature on the property transfer. It was confirmed. The stroke angles and pressure patterns didn't match mine. She cross-checked my travel and hospital stay documents, plane tickets, gas receipts, medical access logs, and created a timeline that showed beyond doubt I couldn't have been physically present to sign anything. Then came the phone records. Ronald had made 6 calls to a lawyer I didn't know, all within a week of my departure. Julie filed a discovery request. The lawyer's firm eventually coughed up internal emails that hinted at alternative ownership solutions and domestic separation strategies. It was a polite way of saying, "How do we get her out clean?" And then, the twist. Julie's digital contact dug into Vanessa's employment history. She wasn't just Ronald's girlfriend. She had worked for his company in accounting and had been fired the year before for falsifying reimbursement reports. Julie grinned when she read the report. She was perfect for him, she said. 2 liars, 1 con. The court hearing came quickly. It was only the beginning, a preliminary session to review the injunction and confirm that the case warranted full civil investigation. Ronald arrived with a lawyer in a gray suit and a look of unearned confidence. Vanessa wasn't there. Katie showed up alone and sat in the back row, far from me. I wore a dark blue dress and brought the original copy of my grandmother's will, the one that clearly stated the house belonged to me. Julie did most of the speaking, calm, factual, relentless. She presented the forged signature. The timeline, the notary's revoked license, the IP log showing access from my own Wi-Fi network during the alleged signature, the accounting history of Vanessa, and finally, the messages between Ronald and his lawyer. The judge sat quietly through it all, nodding occasionally, making notes. When Julie finished, Ronald's lawyer tried to cast doubt. He called it a misunderstanding between spouses and an unfortunate administrative error. He said I'd abandoned the property and that Ronald had acted in good faith. The judge interrupted him. If this is good faith, counselor, I'd hate to see what bad faith looks like. I glanced at Katie. She was frozen, eyes wide. The injunction was extended. The judge ordered an immediate halt to all financial activities connected to the property and approved our motion for full investigation. As we walked out, Julie leaned toward me and said, "We just cleared the first hill. Now we climb the mountain." I nodded, but deep inside, I felt something shift, not victory, not yet, but dignity. And that was something they hadn't taken. It took 7 months. 7 months of hearings, paperwork, quiet courtroom stares, and slow-building pressure. Vanessa vanished after the first court order. We later learned she fled the state. Ronald stayed, trying to bluff his way through every legal session, each time a little less sure of himself. In the end, the ruling was clear. The judge declared the property transfer null and void. The forged signature, the disqualified notary, the digital traces, the fabricated financial activity. Piece by piece, the story collapsed under its own weight. I was reinstated as the rightful co-owner of the house, though by then I'd already filed for divorce and had no intention of living there again. I didn't want the walls, I wanted the truth, and I got it. Ronald was fined, investigated for fraud, and barred from touching any joint accounts again. His employer, who'd been unaware of the personal scandal, quietly reassigned him to a smaller division, far from public contracts. He lost more than just a house. Katie didn't speak to me for 2 months after the ruling. Then, one rainy afternoon in March, I got a knock on the door. She stood there in a wool coat, eyes tired, lips trembling. "I didn't know he forged anything," she said. "I thought you'd left us. I believed him when he said you wanted to stay away, and when I saw Vanessa in the house, I didn't want to question it. I was angry. I thought you cared more about Grandma than us." I listened, quietly, let her speak. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I see that now." She reached into her purse and pulled out a photo, the 3 of us, in the old garden, laughing with sun in our eyes. She placed it on the table. "Can we start again?" I looked at her, not as a child, not as a traitor, but as someone who had finally grown into herself, who had learned, as I had, what it meant to lose and still stand. "Yes," I said, "we can." I moved into a small cottage not far from town, not as grand, not as full of history, but full of sunlight and silence and peace. I planted hydrangeas again. I kept my books, my favorite mugs, my photo albums. I let go of the rest. And for the first time in years, I started writing again. Just for me. Not because someone betrayed me, but because I remembered who I was before they tried. Sometimes life unravels without warning. The people you trusted most are the ones who cut deepest. But that doesn't mean your story ends in bitterness. Sometimes the hardest path leads you back to yourself. And that's where healing begins. If you've ever been hurt by someone you trusted, If you've ever had to fight for your name, your worth, or your place in the world, know this: you're not alone, and you're stronger than you think. If this story touched you, take a moment to give it a like. And if you want to hear more stories like this about strength, truth, and finding your way back, subscribe. We tell them here, one life at a time.